is it that the regulations are in place after or when the laws are passed by Parliament? Thirdly, what are the process and what is the time frame for regulations to be in place? Can the Minister also confirm if the Pandemic Act that was passed by Parliament last year is being implemented without the regulation as required under Section 62? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Minister for Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and also I'd like to acknowledge the question by the member for Pomio. Mr. Deputy Speaker, by law, Parliament passes acts, and then those acts may make provision for regulations. So regulations provide a more detailed administrative process that are required to follow. And the NEC is the approving authority in most acts for regulations. So some acts say NEC may establish regulations. So it's, in some cases it says it shall. So while I note the questions raised by the member for Pomio, I guess the question now, without the benefit of actually looking at those specific regulations, if those regulations say it shall or say it's may. It's a option discretionary provision in law. On the question on who is responsible, so obviously laws are passed specifically to specific agencies of state, be it works or health. In this case, the questions relate to health. So therefore, the health department will typically take the lead in enforcing or complying with the regulations. So if the questions are asked in relation to health, then it's a matter for the health department or the minister, the member for Pomio to simply write to the Minister for Health or department to raise concerns if some regulations are not being enforced. And if there's no response by the respective minister, then I'm happy for him to write to my department, and we can then assist to either direct or advise the respective agency that they have to comply with the regulation if there is evidence to suggest that it's not being complied with. So I think these respond to the members' questions. Thank you.
Honourable Governor for Central.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome my fellow brother and MP, Honourable Lohiyabo Samuel, member for Northwest, to this honourable house that's built on our land. Thank you, Speaker. And in talking about land and this honourable house, built in our capital city of Port Moresby, it also brings its fair share of problems. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my question with a notice to the Honourable Minister for Police. As you know, I've been very vocal about driving my economy like every other province in Central. And I've been encouraging all my people to go back to the villages to start working to build our economy. And with that, I am driving my economic pillar of agriculture and tourism that's complemented with sports. To do this, Mr. Speaker, I will be faced with two very big challenges. One is infrastructure that we are now working on. Secondly, my biggest challenge will be law and order. As you speak, Mr. Speaker, NCD, as you can see, is faced with a lot of law and order issues. And a lot of the victims within this is from my people of Central Province. If my people are not being killed here in the city, they have been harassed. This week, we had a 12-year-old girl raped in broad daylight by PNB operators in the city. And I have heard nothing from even the city, especially when we have a very vocal gender-based violence committee. But to carry on, Mr. Speaker, you will also notice that I am building border posts around my province. And that is to manage and mitigate the problems that will come with Connect PNG and Link PNG. I'm encouraging my people to go back to the villages because I want them to start working the land. I want them to start building an economy in the province so that we can start improving the living standards of my people. But with Connect PNG, we will have a lot of people passing through the province to come into NCD, because that's where they want to end up. So my question, Mr. Speaker, to the Honorable Minister is, can the Minister explain how they plan to manage the ever-escalating law and order problems in the city that my people seem to be victimized a lot? And secondly, Mr. Speaker, Acting Speaker, can the Minister tell his Honorable House that with the plans of Connect and Link PNG, have they been looking seriously with my concerns of having a separate Central Police Command? We can't keep going under the NCD Police Command. As you can see, the NCD are already under a lot of pressure just trying to maintain the problems with NCD. I see that our police force, our Central Police, seem to be very unorganized because priority is always given to NCD. So with the roads planning on getting connected, I encourage the police minister to seriously look at having Central Province's own police command so that we can then try to manage our law and order issues in our province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Minister for Police.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Governor of Central. Let me take the opportunity to talk to some Governor. I think the city is built on your land, and I think that the people of Central, I want to thank people of Central that you're one of the most peace-loving people here. You plus stop now, me plus stop. But so far, I think people disrespect people for a long time. And I think the governor has got some very important points here. Let me make it clear to all of us that are coming outside to live in the city and build our lives here, build our families here. It's about time we all stand together and respect them. Huh?
That's right.
And it's about time too. Policing is not a issue of the police department. The police too must be taken as a community thing, so you may all can assist him police to work with me. To this point of time, I agree with the governor. So far, with the media and with the reports we are getting in the police, we have seemed to abuse and have not realized that the privileges that we have to do business and live in a good city, you may all abuse him because you may line outside will come back up stuff. So, me talk sorry, the governor, on behalf of the people to your people. Okay, your question, Governor. The escalating law and order. Yes, I agree to that. I want to just inform this House, through the Speaker, that our police number is down. We have a very small number now. Our numbers used to be about 8,000, 9,000. So today, we got close to about 6,000 police to serve the entire 8.9 million people. And we're struggling to build our number up. And now, while I have the floor too, I want to thank the Papua New Guinea and Australian partnership program that we have done. Our Bomana barracks has been upgraded, and very soon we're going to start looking more recruits going inside now. So in the next 8-7 months, we want to build our numbers, our new police up to another 500. We have a lot have been retired. Last year we retired about 320. This year, another 68. So when you look at the number now, our police number will be coming down to 6,200. So as far as we go, Governor, I will assure that I will put some time into it. I will talk to my commissioner, and we'll try to see what we can do for Central. Central is the most important location in our country. And I understand that you are building borders, and I can assure you that we will talk with the commissioner, and we'll try to come up with a separate command for you. For now, I request that you come to our office. Let us talk, because we have this SP jet. There's a new policy we have been playing. It's a plan in our corporate plan 2021 to 2030. In there, we want to do partnership with our provinces. We want to do partnership with this district, build our reserve, try to see what resource you have on the ground, try to see the police capacity we have on the ground, the police houses. If we have to increase our police number too, we have to look at the infrastructure and every other things too. So I argue your leaders that who have law and order problems and who want to seriously discuss this issue, I ask you to come to our office and we can discuss all these matters. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member, our question time has already been lapsed, so I would not allow for the supplementary. Sorry. As I've said, our question time have already been lapsed. And we only get the response from the Minister, and I can't allow for your supplementary. Honourable members, I inform Parliament that provincial executive members of the Amending Provincial Assembly are present in the public gallery. On behalf of the National Parliament, I welcome them. Papers. Our Leader of Government Business.
Speaker, before me, ask him leave the Parliament, me too like acknowledge him. All students belong. Political science joining me from the Parliament. Wish them all the best, and some of them can be some of our finest advisors in government in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of Parliament to move a motion without notice.
Is the leave granted? Leave granted. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that so much of the standing orders be suspended as would prevent notice number 245. The Minister, B, the Minister for Public Service, presenting the Public Service Management Amendment Bill 2021, government business being called forthwith.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Minister for Public Service, our clerk.
Notice number 245, Minister for Health and HIV/AIDS.
Minister for Health and HIV.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Medical Registration Amendment Bill 2021.
Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Medical Registration Act 1980.
Minister for Health and HIV.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a second time.
Minister, make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, the Medical Registration Act was enacted in the Parliament in 1980. This is the law used to regulate and register all the different cadres of health professionals in Papua New Guinea. This law sets out the requirement of health professional registration and standard under which they are to practice. This law, on the other hand, gives confidence and reassurance to the public of the health professionals' expertise in delivery of safe and quality health services. Why now are we amending the Medical Registration Act of 1980? Well, Mr. Speaker, the Medical Registration Act was enacted in 1980. This law restricted the registration of medical doctors to only graduates of UPNG and foreign-trained doctors. This means the above law did not take into consideration graduates from other universities who may graduate in the future in Papua New Guinea to be registered and become medical doctors. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the reasons why the graduates of Divine Word University who are trained to become doctors cannot be registered under the Medical Registration Act of 1980. How my Department of Health has responded to gap in law? Mr. Speaker, the National Department of Health responded to address the legislative gap by amending the Medical Registration Act to legislatively allow the Divine Word University graduates to be issued provisional license for training and practice under the Act. What does this new Medical Registration Amendment Bill do? Well, Mr. Speaker, the new law addresses limitation by the Medical Registration Act of 1980, which was proposed only for the registering and issuing practice license only to medical officers graduating from the University of Papua New Guinea. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have been three important sections of the former Medical Registration Act considered and amended in order to register the new medical officers graduating from the Divine Word University, and this amendment includes Amendment 1, Constitution of the Board. Section 4 of the Medical Registration Act, referred to as the Principal Act, is amended to include the registered medical officer from the Faculty of Medicine of Divine Word University who will represent its graduates. Amendment 2, minimum qualifications for provincial registration medical practitioner. Section 21 of the Medical Registration Act is amended to incorporate medical officers graduating from Divine Word University or any other universities graduating medical officers in the future. Amendment 3, minimum qualifications of provincial registration dental practitioner. Section 33 of the Medical Registration Act is amended to incorporate dental medical officers graduating from Divine Word University or any other universities graduating medical officers in the future. Mr. Speaker, there are a total of 19 first cohort of newly trained doctors have graduated in March 2021 and are still waiting to be allocated to the medical residency training program in their respective provincial health authority provinces. Without the passage of this amendment, the medical board will not be able to register the medical students who graduate from Divine Word University. That would stop them from practicing medicine in PNG. How Medical Registration Amendment Bill 2021 benefits Papua New Guinea and the health sector? It benefits us by achieving the government of PNG's vision to increase the workforce by 2050. Their engagement will address the medical doctors' workforce gaps faced by the government of PNG. From the National Department of Health Human Resource Information data dated 21st of January 2019, there is a total of 11,823 health workforce in the country out of 16,247 total health workforces required. Medical officers workforce in the country is only 526 of the 855 medical officers required. The 19 newly trained doctors will add to the required total by the government of Papua New Guinea, thus enhancing the total number of medical doctors workforce and enhancing the health service delivery. Their engagement after residential training will be upon formal application process based on the position vacancy at the provincial and the district levels. Other legislative reforms of Medical Registration Act 1980. Mr. Speaker, follows suit from the amendment of the Medical Registration Act of 1980. The National Department of Health will continue to work on Health Practitioners Bill 2021, which will amend the Medical Registration Act of 1980. The Health Practitioners Bill of 2021 will regulate all the different health professional cadres and intend to establish an autonomous registration board that is required to create its own revenue and effectively address many legislative gaps in the current Medical Registration Act of 1980. I commend this bill to the House.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my support to the Minister's bill for our House to pass into law. It is appropriate statistics that he just quoted, 526 doctors present in our country in the face of about 800 plus required, or if not more, compels us to ensure that we register all doctors trained in our country, and this bill is in the right space. Our country needs more doctors and more medical workers. In the face of COVID-19, in the face of potential disease and pandemic and endemics into the future, we need to train more doctors. I'd like to thank TVWAN University for stepping in and filling in this gap. I'd like to also thank previous health ministers and the system and who have processed TVWAN University to this stage to complement the need in training more medical workers in our country and all medical school operators in our country. In this instance, this bill makes amendment to the existing Medical Registration Act that allows for Medical Registration Act that allows for us to recognize degrees that are being conferred in this instance in the TVWAN University, and this bill should be supported by both sides of the House because it allows for us to bring in those doctors who are already trained in waiting to be conferred provisional license and for them to move into our workforce in our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Clerk. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be now read the third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Honourable members, in correction, the question is that the bill now be read the second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Medical Registration Act, 1980.
Minister for Health and HIV.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the third reading forthwith.
Is the leave granted? Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time.
The Honourable Member for Abao.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I stand in support of the amendment proposed by the Honourable Minister for Health, which is well overdue, and I congratulate the Minister on this important initiative. But I'd like to highlight two areas that I think needs to be re-looked at properly. One is the amendment on the constitution of the board. I personally don't believe that a medical practitioner from the TVWAN University should be specifically mentioned in a law. You should have a broad representation, not mention the TVWAN University medical practitioner. I think it's wrong in principle. So I would request that the House look at this and make an amendment on this one, because I don't think you need to name a practitioner from the TVWAN University to be on this very important board. We don't want to do that because in view of the proposed, the new medical practitioners bill which the Minister alluded to, that work has been going on since 2015, 16, 17. That bill will look at the overhauling of the entire registration of nurses, doctors, technicians, etc., etc. That's a very comprehensive one because that one has to come very, very quickly because of the way the globe is moving. We now having, for example, we are inviting bilateral partners through bilateral arrangements to bring their doctors, for example, in the COVID issue from China, from Australia, and it impacts on the Medical Registration Board on how to manage it, and therefore the current Medical Registration Act is outdated and it doesn't include the 21st century direction in the world is moving into. And so we will have to relook at
the entire Medical Registration Act, and I look forward to the Minister bringing the new practitioners bill in the 2021. So thank you, Minister, for announcing that, and we look forward to supporting it. The second point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I would want to make, and I would allude to the Minister for Public Service. In the olden days, when we knew how many graduates would be coming out from the medical school, the Department of Personnel Management established those positions. So no medical student graduating is waiting for positions to be created. That provision was removed. So I strongly suggest Minister for Health and Minister for Public Service, who understands, both of you understand the system, to create positions the year before they graduate, so that the students coming out, because we are very short of doctors, you and I know that. So they just come into those field positions and they don't have to wait. So I strongly suggest that the two ministers sit and look at this seriously, because we will have to double the numbers of our, as Minister alluded to in the new health plan, that we need to graduate at least 100 doctors every year to meet with the 3% growth rate in the country. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Governor for Oro.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I rise to support this bill as well. I just want to make a few comments about our situation in regards to the health sector. Some very sobering statistics. We just heard in a response the police minister speak about the atrocious statistics in regards to policemen per citizen. Well, the situation in the health sector is even worse. Apparently, according to the World Health Organization, we have 5.3 nurses per 10,000 and 0.5 doctors per 10,000. This is terrible. These are statistics that we must be very mindful of, and I urge our government, and they have been doing a magnificent job, I must say, in terms of addressing these issues. I myself have visited the medical faculty as the chairman of the Public Sector Reform Committee and was quite taken at the situation they face. That organization produces 50 doctors a year, or less than that actually, whereas a country like Fiji, which is about the size of one of our larger provinces, produces more than 50 doctors a year. So that's an area that we need to address, Minister, and I'm sure you're working on it. And I just wanted to mention those statistics and also suggest that we also consider the idea of recruiting doctors from offshore, overseas, and bringing them into Papua New Guinea. In the last term, I brought the Cuban ambassador from Australia, because Cuba has about 50,000 doctors that are working in 67 countries. And we wanted to look at the possibility of bringing Cuban doctors so that every district, every station can at least have a doctor in the aid post, in the district hospitals, because right now they are not there. Kokoda, for instance. Kokoda serves about almost 30,000 people, but there's not a doctor there. We can't get a doctor there. It's very difficult. This is an area I would like the health minister to take note of, the possibilities of bringing doctors from other countries. We need as many doctors as possible. In every district, in every station, there should be a doctor. Why is it that they are unable to come into this country? I mean, even the former Prime Minister paid a visit to Cuba and made an arrangement for this. And again, it went nowhere. They don't have to be from Cuba. I mean, they can be from other countries. But that's an example of what needs to be done so that we take an aggressive, proactive effort to addressing these issues that our rural population face. 85% of our people live in the rural areas, remember this. And for a nation of 9 million, or is it 6 million, or 8 million, or 12 million, we don't even know, because, again, we don't know the true statistics. Since the census and the failed NID project and all these type of things have not given us clarity on exactly what is our population. But I commend you, Minister, for the efforts that you are undertaking. I would also like to urge you to bring to Parliament to NEC, the PHA regulations, which have been void for the last 10 years. The lack of these regulations is causing problems in our provinces. PHAs are not functioning. If you have a good chairman and a good CEO, that formula will make PHAs function. But for whatever reason, if there's no good chairman or no good CEO, the PHA will not function. This is a reality. And once we turn to PHA, for example, let me just continue, the experience from Oro. When we went into PHA, we were convinced that this would be a better option for us than the previous option that we had. But what we found was the opposite. There's less funding coming into the provinces now. Or if there's funding that's coming in, it's bottlenecked at the PHA headquarters and not making it to the districts and stations. And in fact, in the districts and stations, the 8 post and district hospitals, the community health workers and nurses, I won't mention doctors because I just mentioned they're not there, they are charging fees so that they can raise fees to go and purchase medication. This is an atrocious situation. We need to address that as well. So I just want us to be mindful of that. I believe we should be building as many medical training institutions as possible throughout the country. We can't be just producing 50 doctors a year. I mean, for a country the size of Papua New Guinea, with all the resources that we have, we're always beating our chest and telling the whole world that we are a nugget of gold floating in a sea of oil, but the reality on the ground is not there in terms of health. We need to build more medical training facilities. We need to consider the possibility of bringing in doctors from other countries. And we need to address these atrocious statistics. So, Minister, our province will be supporting you in your efforts, and we will be reminding you from time to time about the statistics. Please attend to this. Thank you very much.
Honourable Member for TVWAN.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It took seems like you too long. Thank you, Lord Minister of Health. Lord, bringing very important amendment around this Medical Registration Act 1980. Me I'll give the contribution from here. I support one time. Support temu toto blongan to. I must say long overdue amendment. Yes, medical doctors party talk. You know what enough long. Papua New Guinea now. One time government blame me. Now this government you me lulu long. One district, one rural hospital. Now it's about time. Let me support this law. So in 5-10 years time, you may expect him at least a doctor is inside one rural hospital by me. One thing that meeting was important and Mosam. Make sure time you make him display, time you amend this law before graduates comes out. Make sure that terms the condition law too, which is very important. The holy mul instead of public system by me. Time you make him display, some of the doctors move out the private sector, so by you lose him 1 or 2 important doctors blame me. Inside the public system blame me. Now the other thing, I'm long regulation long. Make sure the standardizing, all examination belong all interview letters belong all. Where from Port Moresby, UPNG, the one where Muscat Sambra can standardize, not necessarily curriculum, but doing passport belong exam belong all. So they're all on the same wavelength. Or senior one black and exam, or graduate one black and exam. So everybody will look standard and we come up. So what is the contribution from here? Me support the minister and long overdue. Now in all tassel, you will look to standardize him, improve him. Now improve all maternal mortality, infant mortality by me through, encourage him all nursing schools by me too. Now consider him on midwifery program or pediatric program too have. So when you may try to improve him, standard graduates, doctors, you may to look at nursing program, we go down to the community health worker program. So we should have enough number long. Fill him in, that's like dream of the government long. One district, one rural hospital. On that note, PHA, what the Department of Health, you must work one time, make sure when we want to have a rural hospital, it must standardize building. Plan the building now, some classroom. So it has to be standardized. Work closely with standards from health department. I see long one of setting by you must have standardized buildings. So the facilities and one kind of together. So what I'm thank you, Minister, will support you all the way through. But I'm going to some law long and a half. So you must stand up where all university must, passing by university system, somebody talk me top, you down, me top, you down. So standardize him all get straight. So give me all them one per human being, that's by him all work like me. You know, some Lalayam, Narapla, superhuman being, most PM, not by human being, we are all 206 bones, blood, over something one plus also. Make sure that standardized must come up so there's no suppression or inferior or Narapla college to Narapla college. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Pomio.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'd like to also join the other members of Parliament in supporting what the Minister for Health has done with regard to the amendment of the Medical Registration Act of 1980. It's a historic moment for our country, and I believe it will give that peace to many of our students who have actually graduated from TVWAN University this year. I'd like to make some special comments or acknowledgement to the chairman of the medical board and the dean of the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, Professor Teforani, and his team for actually doing this great work of going to TVWAN University in 2019. That has actually led to doing the accreditation of the program, and today we have seen this number of the students graduating from TVWAN. We acknowledge the support and the foresight done by the former TVWAN University president, Father Jan Suba, for his foresight in making sure that the TVWAN University, by today or this year on, will be able to undertake such important programs. Second point, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make is for the government to continue to support the University of Papua New Guinea, especially under the School of Medicine and Health Sciences, to be a standalone entity, so they can focus to making their own arrangements, coming up with their own structures, so that they can become under the autonomy program, so they can concentrate and focus on many of the things that they want to do as a university in the future. In that regard, they can also improve and increase the number of medical students and other cadres of health workers coming out from the medical faculty. With regard to PHA, Mr. Speaker, I think about PHA because many of the students coming out from other cadres of health workers, they will be part of the PHA arrangement in most of the provinces. Mr. Speaker, I do not agree that the PHAs are not receiving enough funds. If we look at this year's budget, 2021 budget, the 21 PHs were allocated more than 900 million kina. That is to the PHs alone for this year. And that's a huge amount of funding going straight to the 21 PHs. So if it is not about funds, Mr. Speaker, where is the problem? Mr. Speaker, I've seen from this report that's given to us by the Auditor General this week, that's regarding the Enga PHA. I want to say this, the top structure, which I'd like the Minister for Health to have a look at with his team, the top structure of the PHA, the governance structure. For example, if you still have this book, you see, you refer today to page number 6.
We have a point of order, Prime Minister.
With greatest respect to a colleague member of Parliament on the other side, if we could just restrict to the issue before us here, and he could make reference to that, but come back to the main issue before us in respect to the bills, and let's get on with the business, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Pomio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Deputy Speaker. I just want to make mention that the Department of Health to have a look at the governance structure because this actually impacts the operations of the PHAs in the provinces. I've seen that the reporting mechanism is not correct because we see the minister sitting on the top with the PHA board reporting to the minister, and we have the governor of the province right below the PHA board, and not reporting through or directly to the governor of the PHA board, which is, I believe, doesn't meet the intent of the PHAs. That's an example. I've seen the PHA structure for Eastern Bhutan Province and the Department of Health, which are three different structures at the governance level. And I believe the Department of Health will have to come today and make that review these structures and make it standardized so that everyone is actually flowing along the same line. This is important today, critical, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if we are to see operational efficiencies and effectiveness in the PHS work environment. I believe we need to get a top structure, governance straight, and already clearly organized before we can talk about other things. With this regard, with these few points, I thank again the Minister for Health for coming up and presenting this report on amendment today to the floor of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The question is that the bill now be read the third time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Clerk.
Reading a bill for an act to amend the Medical Registration Act 1980.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read.
Sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You already have the support, so.
Thank you.
Clerk.
Public Services Management Amendment Bill 2021. Minister for Public Service.
The Minister for Public Service.
Mr. Speaker, I present the Public Service Management Amendment Bill 2021.
Clerk.
First reading, a bill for an act to amend the Public Services Management Act 1995 and for related purposes.
Minister for Public Service.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move the second reading forthwith.
Is the leave granted? Minister, make your speech.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill now be read the second time.
Make your speech, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as this is my first business as the Public Service Minister, I'd like to take this time to thank the Prime Minister for recognizing the people of Duku in allocating the Ministry of Public Service. And also, I'd like to acknowledge the good relationship we have with all my colleague members of Parliament through coming in 2012. And so this is my first business, and I'll go through the short speech, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on coming into office in June 2019, the Marape Basil government pledged to do a review of legislations and implement reforms to better improve the governance mechanisms, including reviewing laws that have been outdated and do not serve the interests of the people of Papua New Guinea. One of the reforms, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the administrative sector was to review the Public Service Management Act 1995 on the provisions relating to the resignation of public servants to contest the general elections. It was interesting to note where the interests of our public servants lie in the course of the service to the state, noting that as servants of the state, they were to commit themselves fully to serving the state. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in a major consultative discussing on this matter, the government believes that we need to draw the line so that the public service can operate on its own without the interference of those public servants who wish to contest the elections, and noting from past experiences that those who contested the national elections, the elections and were unsuccessful and returned back to the public service have always caused instability in the organizations. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because of these issues, the National Executive Council has approved the amendment to the Public Service Management Act on this particular issue, and the amendments are as follows. 1. An officer who wishes to contest the general election will now resign 12 months prior to the issuing of writs as compared to current 6 months notice. And this will be implemented in the 2027 general elections and general elections thereafter. Mr. Speaker, 2, an officer who contests the general elections and is unsuccessful can be employed back into the public service after a period of 5 years from the general election he or she contested in, but through the normal selection and recruitment process. This amendment, if passed, will take effect from the 2022 general elections and the general elections thereafter. Mr. Speaker, I am confident these amendments will clearly identify and set the course of our public servants in the line of their duties, that is, to serve the state with full commitment and to leave the service and to become politicians, which is also to serve the state, but in another setting. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Marabe-Bessel government, I commend all the members on both sides of this House on the passing of the Public Service Management Act, Bill 2021. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Sala.
And I also thank my good friend, the Minister for Public Service, for introducing this legislation. Unfortunately, on this occasion, I rise to express an opposing view for 2 reasons. First of all, I'd like to put it on the record that I do not support a view or an amendment or any law that would unfairly and unreasonably restrict the right of our people from standing for elective office. I say this taking into account that our people's right to choose a leader may be restricted in this kind of legislation. When our people go to vote, they want the best range of candidates, and in many cases, this includes highly educated, well-regarded public servants. The examples are many. They sit in this honorable House today, on both sides of the House, including the honorable leader who has just introduced this legislation. It is, in my respectful opinion, an unfair snipe at the public servants, because I rise to ask if the government is also aware that there are public servants who are not covered under the Public Service Management Act. For instance, constitutional office holders. The Minister for Justice will tell us if he knows that judges have in the past resigned and got reappointed to the bench. Only yesterday we were debating on the importance of amendments that were introduced to govern our corporate sector and the need for us to tighten the legislative scheme and regime there so that we maintain good people to lead our nation in where the our corporations are concerned. But we didn't say anything about restricting them in the same way. So my question is, why are we targeting the public servants? This is not the first time that this amendment has been made. In the past, it was made
And we restricted it to 6 months in subsection 2A. Now we want to increase it to 12 months. What is the justification? Mr. Speaker, these explanatory notes refer to consultation. Well, I've been in the district in rural Milne, and I haven't heard about a consultation, but I'd be interested in knowing whether PEA has been involved in this consultation. Because after we pass this legislation, we don't want it to be followed by another union action. Because it is well within our Public Servants' right to say that parliamentarians are protecting themselves because 2022 elections is around the corner. And we will say the same thing about presidents. Only a few days ago in this Honorable House, very strong views were expressed about the right of presidents to participate in the national elections. All I'm arguing this morning, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this legislation is that whilst the intention is good, the text of these amendments already begin to impinge upon the rights not just of our public servants to contest elections, but the rights of our voters. My last point in relation to the expectation that someone who resigns and contests should be expected to reapply after 5 years following the national elections. That is draconian. That's unreasonable in my respectful view. That's oppressive. The assumption is that he's reapplying because he's still useful. But keeping them out for 5 years, are we going to give them a refresher training when they return? In a time when our nation is depleted in our workforce, and especially capable citizens who can serve the nation here in this Honorable House or in our civil service, this is the kind of legislation that is restrictive, unreasonable, and constitutionally questionable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not support this amendment.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to this bill on the basis that it doesn't prohibit public servants from contesting elections. The right to contest elections still remains. This bill, in summary, succinctly, allows for public servants who are resigning to contest elections to resign 12 months earlier, but this amendment on the basis of 12 months earlier will take effect in the 2027 election going forward. We've now gone past a 12-month period for 2022. But on the issue of coming back to work in the public service will take place. They're entitled to come back to public service, but we're allowing them to stay out for 4 years or 5 years minimum, including the 1 year. They take 12 months early before the writs are issued. For these Papua New Guineans who feel they have right to contest elections, they have contested. And if they want to come back, they join the public service 4 years down the line. So it does not in any sense restrict them from coming back into the public service. What we're simply trying to do here is eliminate professional candidates in the public service. Professional candidates in the public service who just go in and out at will, coming back and they work and they stay in the system, and sometimes they get in the way of the public service flowing with work because they have an interest somewhere in politics. So we're trying to differentiate between genuine contestants who feel they have some space to contest in politics and contribute in politics. They could resign 12 months in early, eliminate them or get them out of the public service system. They prepare for elections 12 months, and this 12 months period will take into effect in 2026 in preparation for 2027. But right now, what this law also will mean is that those who comply with the existing law as it is, you resign today. Well, if you're not successful in 2022, you can reapply in 2026 to come back into public service, effectively distancing the 5-year period. So genuine candidates are out there contesting in the elections, and we don't allow those who are professional candidates to come in and out using government network, using government system, stand in the way of the public service being effectively worked, because that public servant has an interest in politics down the road. And so, Mr. Speaker and members of the House, this does not in any way prohibit Papua New Guineans who feel they qualify, can contest elections to contest, but also give them ability. If they want to come back and they contest one and they feel, well, politics is not their calling in life, then they could join public service down the line instead of coming back in a 12-year, 12-month period, and coming back only to resign again 3 years down the line, and having this high movement of public servants who may not be concentrating on work, but concentrating on politics in a public service structure. So I commend this. It tries to eliminate unnecessary politics in the public service, give stability in the public service, get the genuine candidates to come out and contest elections, and allow for the cleaner process, because so far, many occasions in between, you have candidates who contest, they lose, they come back to the public service, they contest again, they go out again the next 3 or 4 year, lose again, they come back. Just quite a bit of mess in our public service. That's why this bill aims to clean that process up and allow for genuine candidates to contest, and allow for those who feel they had enough of politics to come back into public service in a window that, in our view, eliminates this one term of politics in between, and allowing them to come back one term off the last election they've contested. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Governor for Shipping.
Mr. Speaker, I would disagree, and I would agree with the honorable member of the opposition. Mr. Speaker, it's difficult enough for anyone to win an election, whether you're a public servant, particularly so if you're a woman. Mr. Speaker, all of us members of parliament actually have an interest in this bill, which means that we are biased in this decision-making process. If we were sitting on a board in a private organization, they would ask us to leave the room so the decision could be made without us, Mr. Speaker. So the principle is actually wrong in us trying to pass a bill like this that would protect our positions. And that's the way the public would see it, Mr. Speaker. As members of the parliament, we must be making laws that the public can see is in the interest of public good. But right now, Mr. Speaker, our people are watching us because we just gave permission for this to be broadcasted. And our people are actually going to think, because the election's around the corner, and while I hear what the Honorable Prime Minister has said, our people will still think that we are making this law to protect ourselves. And on that basis alone, on that principle alone, we can't be doing this. And I want to make a suggestion to my good minister, who's in fact a very hard-working minister, and is one of the best performing ministers. I have to say, in ECP, we have someone who ran for the elections who is now back in the public service. And I want to say he's doing a brilliant job for the people of ECP. We all run for elections for different things, Mr. Speaker, for different reasons. We want what's best for our country. We may disagree on how, but there is no question we all want what is best for our country. The question is the method of how we achieve that. We cannot put into law something that is hard and fast and can be seen as oppressive. It's an oppressive law. It's an oppressive amendment, Mr. Speaker. I would have liked to see an amendment to the Public Services Management Act go much further than just restricting people from running for elections. We have so many issues in the public service, Mr. Speaker, particularly on performance. And I would have liked to see if there was going to be a management of the conduct, because that is what we are trying to deal with in this amendment. We are trying to deal with the conduct of public servants. The bill could have gone much further. For example, we've got the Public Services Commission. That is a constitutional office that has been sitting there since 1975, and all it does, Mr. Speaker, is protect bad behaving public servants. That's all it does. A public servant doesn't want to work, he doesn't want to follow rules,
goes and steals money or does whatever, all they have to do, write to the Public Services Commission. The Public Services Commission reinstates them. And you have no choice but to take them on. What I would have liked to see, Mr. Speaker, is an amendment to the Constitution governing the Public Services Commission. So decisions such as this are taken away from the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We should not be making these decisions. An independent commission like the Public Services Commission should be given the task of assessing when public servants should leave and go to the elections. And in order to readmit them, we should task Public Services Commission to actually check if this person is fit and proper to come back, or if this person is a serial offender, if you like, abusing the systems and processes so they can continue to run for elections or whatever it is they're doing, taking advantage of the systems. But Mr. Speaker, I think it would be dishonorable of this House if we agree to this bill, because it demeans the decorum in this House, because we have an interest. I want to stress that, Mr. Speaker. I therefore would urge the good minister to go back and take a look at the entire Public Services Management Act and to bring in significant reform, and to consider also, as I have suggested earlier, taking another look at the Public Services Commission. On the basis of principle, Mr. Speaker, I have to say, I do not support the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, me too like Rais Loedim. Comments blooming and support blooming law this bill. Mr. Speaker, I commend the Public Service Minister when he took office. He was giving certain KPIs on which he has a very difficult job in terms of reforming the public sector. When the original intention of this bill was presented in Cabinet, I think the idea was not to protect anyone on this floor. The ambition of the bill was one, Mr. Speaker, time election, and we were not specifically targeting public servants. When the shadow AG expresses his view in terms of saying that constitutional officers, Mr. Speaker, these constitutional officers don't have access to resources such as some public servants. For example, my Secretary for National Planning, Secretary for Finance, Secretary for Works. These public servants are powerful positions which they have enormous access to resources. Now, it creates an unbalanced playing field when a coffee buyer somewhere is trying to stand for election and you have a public servant abusing and using those public resources, knowing that he will stand for public office. Now, what does it create for that person on the field who is trying to contest and he's probably budgeting money or saving up money to stand for elections? And you have a public servant with a checkbook, Section 32 officer, who's floating around with hire cars and paying this and paying that, and then knowing that he will stand for election again. So it's an abuse of those resources. So the intention of the bill is to say, if you want to go into election, you do it early, so we restrict your accessibility to abuse resources, government resources, for your own individual ambition to become a politician. That is the intention of this bill, Mr. Speaker. Number two, we have career public servants. Now, when someone resigns and goes off, and then or lose no come back instead of public service, is preoccupying a position that someone is trying to build a career in their office. So say, for example, someone who is an FAS in national planning, he goes and stands in election, he comes back, and he comes to the same position. And the AAS is trying to work himself up the ranks of that career. And someone is just coming back, sitting on that position and preoccupying a position that someone is trying to elevate himself to the next career. So this intention of the bill is simple, Mr. Speaker. We are not trying to protect anyone in this House. I'm sure all these gentlemen in this are all prepared to go into the floor of elections come 2022. The intention or the idea of this bill that a good public service minister is trying to present is to create an equal playing field for everyone, not just for our sitting members, but everyone who wants to stand for election. That everyone must go to the floor, go to the people in 2022 with an equal playing field, not abusing public resources to go and stand. So that is the intention of this bill, Mr. Speaker, and I commend everyone that we can support the Public Service Minister and he can pass this bill. Thank you.
The question is the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Mr. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to amend the Public Services Management Act 1995 and for related purposes.
Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I ask leave of the Parliament to move third reading forthwith.
Is leave granted? Leave granted. Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill now be read the third time.
The question is that the question be put. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. In accordance with constitutional requirements, this bill must be passed by an absolute majority of 56 members. Clerk, please ring the bells. Attendants, close the doors. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Would those in favor please stand? Those against, please stand. The results of the vote. Those in support of the bill, 81, and those against, 7. Mr. Clark.
Act to amend the Public Services Management Act 1995 and for related purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Leader of Government Business.
I thank the House for sitting through and discussing these couple of important bills and at the same time showing support and passing those bills that we've just passed. I thank the other side as well, leaders in the opposition, government side as well. And I'd like to move that we adjourn Parliament to tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Parliament is now adjourned to 10 o'clock tomorrow.